Hey everyone, Eric Hurst here, coming to you with a remote training cafe. Hey everyone, Eric Hurst here. I'm coming to you remote today for Training Cafe. I'm here in Vegas, out here in the desert, and taking a rest day today after climbing the last couple of days and enjoying some limestone climbing up on Mount Charleston, where it's perfect conditions right now. But in any case, Training Cafe today, the main focus is effective projecting and trusting the process of working on your project boulder problem, route, big wall, whatever it may be. And I guess before we get to that, two things. First of all, coffee. It is Training Cafe after all. So let's sip together. After all, what is better than climbing, training, and coffee? That's the good life. And the second thing is the shout out for this episode. And this one to an American boulderer named Drew Ruana. I saw a post on his social media over the weekend that I believe he sent his 10th boulder problem, V15 or harder, in the last 10 months. So that's an incredible track record. I think 3 of those are V16s. So that puts him really at the top, makes him one of the best, not only in the United States, but in the world in terms of the last 10 months to do that many hard boulders. And importantly, not get injured, because the power requirements of doing hard boulders like that, the training to stay in shape for 10 months, to kind of be peaked for 10 months, to be pulling on small holds constantly and not tweak a tendon, not hurt a shoulder or an elbow, to have your skin survive that type of training and working projects. I think his latest V15 he worked on maybe 7 sessions. That's not 7 days in a row, but maybe 7 sessions over a couple of weeks. But still, you got to keep your skin to hold up. And so that shows, really to climb your very best, to get, into elite status in rock climbing. It's more than strong fingers. It takes the complete person to put the complete puzzle together in terms of, training. And, Drew's been climbing since he could walk. And so he has the skill set for sure, but you still need the mental game. You still need the motivation, and you physically need to keep it together and not get injured. And, in any elite sport, whether it's track and field or, professional team sports or rock climbing, injury ends a lot of dreams, a lot of careers, or at least seasons. And so to go 10 months and climb at that level and not get injured is pretty amazing. And I just wanted to share with you one brief text that I traded with Drew yesterday, talking about his incredible season that he's had. And, Drew is one of our PhysiVantage pro athletes. And he wrote me that supercharged collagen makes a world of difference. It's literally changed the skin game for me. So, supercharged collagen, we have designed it based on the research that consuming it prior to tendon and ligament loading helps increase collagen synthesis and recovery of connective tissues. It can help recovery from injury, or it can help just support the process of making your tendons and ligaments slowly stronger over time, over months and years. You need the nutrition, you need the loading, and you need to couple them together. But also, there's pretty good research that consuming vitamin C enriched hydrolyzed collagen also supports, perhaps enhances, collagen synthesis in the skin layer, which can make your skin stronger, perhaps a bit more rip resistant, tear resistant. And now everybody's different in terms of how sweaty their hands are. And, the climate that you climb in affects that. And the type of rock you climb on affects skin wear. So there's a lot of factors there. But Drew's saying that the supercharged collagen has been game changing in terms of the skin. And he's been using PhysiVantage products for almost a year. So there's like a direct correlation, at least time-wise, with him beginning to use PhysiVantage products like the supercharged collagen and the weapons grade whey and his streak of 10 V15s in 10 months. And so I really appreciate that endorsement from Drew. And so that's pretty cool. If you'd like to learn more about PhysiVantage, that's the training for climbing sister brand, go to PhysiVantage.com. And so with that, let's move on here. I hope, I'm in an Airbnb in Vegas. I don't know how good the Wi-Fi is here. I hope, the signal's holding up and we have a decent stream going here. But let's move on to the topic of effective projecting. I'll spend maybe 10 minutes on this. And then I'll get to some of your questions. And I see some questions coming in here, and I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Okay, so effective projecting, at this stage of my career, I'm much more of a route climber than I am a boulderer. I do some bouldering as training. But when I go on a trip like I'm on now for a week or two, my goal is to send routes. And so I realize, viewers of this training cafe, some of you may be boulder specialists, some of you may be route specialists. And, the recipe for succeeding on your projects is really not all that different, boulder to route. Boulders tend to be, of course, short and intense. And it might just be a matter of fighting through one or two hard moves, whereas a route can be, of course, quite long and have multiple cruxes and be a very complex puzzle to solve and put together compared to a 5-meter boulder problem. But, the process that you go through is more or less the same with a few slight adjustments. And so I want to give you kind of the 6 steps, or, what are 6 phases you need to go through in projecting. And if it's a project that's very doable for you, it maybe is a route that fits your style and your strengths, you may go through these 6 steps in an afternoon and send the route day 1. Or if it's a beyond the limit, dream project, or something that doesn't cater to your strengths and weakness, but more your weaknesses, then it's going to be a longer term battle because you have to learn and improve as a climber. And that takes me to the first step, or the first thing to consider when you're projecting, and that is to pick the right project for the moment, for kind of what your short-term goals are. Are you on a rare weekend trip somewhere, and you just want to send something, do something quick in a few goes? Or do you have a project at a home crag that you can work on throughout the year and put a lot of days and a lot of time into training and solving that puzzle? Perhaps you're on a week or 2 trip like I am, and so you're willing to, jump in on something that's maybe not going to happen in a day, but hopefully in a few days you can send the project. Those are all things you need to consider when you're, picking a project. A big one is it something that you look at and can see that the moves, the style of the climbing is something that you're good at, that you've done a lot of recently or in the past? That can give you confidence. That can give you, a sense that it might happen pretty quickly. Whereas if it's something that's totally out of the ordinary for you, success is certainly not guaranteed, and it might take quite a bit of work. But actually, that's the project that will make you a better climber. Doing projects that are right in your wheelhouse are great because you're pretty confident from the get-go, and perhaps you'll send the project pretty quickly. But you don't learn much about yourself. You don't learn much about climbing, when you're kind of picking the low-hanging fruit. Whereas if you pick something that is intimidating, or something that is out of your style, something foreign to you in terms of the rock type, or the angle of the rock, or maybe the length of the route. Maybe you're really good at 15-meter sport routes, but to go up on a 50-meter sport route or a 30-meter sport route would be a lot different in terms of the requirements, physically and endurance wise. So know what you're getting into, and is it a project that has a lot of learning potential, but might be more frustrating and take more time, or is it something that is more kind of in your wheelhouse and low-hanging fruit that you can do quickly? So know what you're getting into. And then step 2, when you go up and begin to kind of go bolt to bolt on the route or on your maiden voyages on the boulder problem, really be an analyst. Try to chunk down the boulder problem or route into 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 parts, logical parts. To help explain this process better, I want to actually tell you a bit about what I've been involved in the last week here at Mount Charleston, which is a limestone area. It's old school, steep power climbing. Not my cup of tea right now, but being an older climber, I'm more of one of those resistance, looking for routes that are more endurance oriented rather than power oriented. And the limestone here is quite slippery, and the grades are definitely hard, old school grades. So I was thinking, when I got here, I'd like to find a 513A, a 7C plus or 2 to work on, and hopefully send 1 or 2 routes up in that grade limit, which is close to my maximum ability. Not quite. I did a couple of 8As this season. But again, because this route isn't exactly in my wheelhouse, it probably is going to take me a little bit of time to put in some work onto it. So the route I chose and settled on after testing out a few different routes was called Warlords. It's at the Hood at Mount Charleston, and it's a route that was put up probably 30 years ago, and it's very old school 13A. I think in a lot of crags today it would probably be 13B or 8A, but I respect the old school grades. I'm definitely not suggesting it should be upgraded. And it just is hard for the grade, in my opinion. But this route, I could chunk down into 3 parts. The route is maybe 50 or 60 feet long, and it starts off steep on pretty good holds. It has a rising traverse, kind of bouldery V3 kind of moves up to like bolt 4. And so you get some pump going, and then you get to a rest, which that rest is a perfect place to kind of define the end of the first chunk, from the ground through kind of the bouldery steep stuff up to a shakeout rest. Now, it's still very steep, but you're on a good hold, and you can shake out for a bit of time before you proceed into the crux of the route. So chunk 1 was from the ground to this rest. Maybe in total to redpoint that section, it might be 12B. 7B, something like that. Then you go into the crux, which goes through a bulge, and there's multiple ways to do it. I saw some other climbers working the route, and it's one of those crux sections where there's definitely a few different sequences that can work depending on your reach, depending on your how much power you have. And so that second chunk through the bulge to get stood up kind of on a slab is only, maybe 6 or 8 moves long, maybe, 3 meters, 10 feet, something like that. But it's power. It's maybe V5, maybe hard V5. I'm not exactly sure. But that chunk is clearly the crux, and there's a few different ways to go about it. And then the final chunk, from once you get over the crux bulge onto a slab where the holds get really small and the feet get slippery and kind of weird, then it's another 3 bolts of climbing up to the anchors. And it's probably 511 plus, but I think for a lot of people, it's the redpoint crux, because you are pumped coming out of the crux, and then you get on small holds and you just kind of have to get over your feet and try to relax and sort through a kind of a complicated sequence to get to the top. So my route had 3 chunks. Your boulder problem might have 2 chunks, maybe 2 hard moves that are each kind of a chunk. Or maybe if you're on a long sport route that is 30 meters long, maybe you'll have 5 chunks. But break the route into parts defined by rests, if possible, where you can kind of pause, catch your breath, reset things. So my route, it's, 50 or 60 feet long. It had 3 chunks. So I kind of am breaking that route into 3 shorter routes. And so that is the second step, is to break the route up, into parts. And then step 3 is to get to work on the crux chunk. When you go bolt to bolt the first time up the route, try to feel out all the moves, start to collect data, start to learn body positions, but don't lock into exact sequences yet. Because, the process of projecting is about refining sequences, refining body positions. And, this route, Warlords, I guess I maybe sent it on my 8th or 9th time on the route, working it, from bottom to top, 8 or 9 times over maybe 3 days of over a week. And I was right up until the last day, right up until yesterday, still kind of refining the footwork, especially up on that slab. So don't lock into sequences too quickly. Certainly in the crux sections, do not. The easier sections, might be dead obvious, and you can just kind of intuit your way through them. But when that crux chunk, in the case of my route, Warlords, through the bulge, that boulder problem, spend some time on that. Really solve that puzzle first, and don't get bogged down with feeling you have to get every, single move figured out from bottom to top on the first go. Go to work on that crux chunk. And in my case, I kind of knew there was a couple ways to do the crux, and I very quickly discerned that I'm pretty tall. I could kind of do a few power kind of dead point moves and take a more direct path versus other people that kind of move right and back left and do maybe 5 moves to navigate the terrain that I can do in 2 or 3 big moves. So that's the third step, is get to work on the crux chunk. Because it's the crux chunk, you're going to struggle. You're going to hang a lot. You're going to need a belayer who will work with you and, invest some time into belaying you, and test different things out. Again, don't fall for a quick conclusion on what you must do in terms of that crux sequence. Keep an open mind, especially when you return a second or third day. Think about still refining and becoming smarter and quicker. That's a big one, is rehearsing the routes and becoming more quick through them. So I guess step 4, on those hardest moves, not only in the crux chunk, but if there's some moves on other chunks, and this is a big one, focus on the feeling of doing the move right. Okay, so my route had, kind of the crux bulge, a couple big moves, then a little bit of a delicate traverse. And then on the third chunk, there was a final little bulge that you had to kind of get against the wall and really stay over your feet because the handholds are small. And so on those most delicate moves, the hardest moves, the ones that I felt maybe I would, maybe fall on redpoint, I really, as I'm working the route, focus on the feeling of the moves. So often climbers get stuck into just visually knowing sequences. Okay, here's a hand, twist, drop knee. You kind of, name the holds. I'm going to reach to the, Dorito, and then I'm going to grab the peanut. And, those are great mnemonics for remembering holds. And, I take mental snapshots of holds that are critical so I can remember them by way of those little mental snapshots. But the feeling, and this is a more subtle thing, but the feeling of a move, like what do you feel through your core? What do you feel, tightness wise or relaxation wise in different parts of your body? And on really hard, technical moves, by memorizing the feeling of doing the hard move the right way, that is the secret to succeeding on that move on redpoint. Because again, if you're just thinking about the sequence as a series of holds, that's not enough. I mean, that's going to get you grabbing the holds in the right order. Important, right? But once you have those holds, is there a subtle, body English, your one knee dropping slightly, your hip turning slightly? Do you feel your body in against the rock? What are the feelings, the sensations? if you can find and identify a feeling that connects with doing the move the right way, when you're doing it on redpoint and you get on those holds, all you have to do is find the feeling. So in the case of my route, after going through the crux bulge and doing this little delicate traverse, the feeling of the delicate traverse was to stay low, feel not that I'm pulling on the holds, but I'm kind of hanging on the holds, and then kind of tiptoeing my feet from left to right across a series of little smears, little edges. And so the feeling of kind of drooping a little bit and being extended was the key feeling for me on that traverse. And then on the third chunk, going through the final bulge, the feeling that I had to find is that literally my chest had to be in touching the rock, like rubbing the rock, which feels a little unusual. Like I typically wouldn't climb that tight to the rock. But on this move, if I was out, then the force vectors would be making my hands come off, and I wouldn't have as much weight on my feet. So by knowing the feeling of doing it the right way with my chest, basically brushing the rock through that last little bulge, loads my fingers in the most favorable way that they're less likely to slip, and also loads my feet maximally. And so I was just telling myself when I was up there, staying against the wall, relax, and just kind of keep that upward momentum going. And so identify the feeling. That's step 4 of doing the hardest moves. That's a real secret. Number 5 is to then begin, once you know the feeling of the hardest moves and you know the sequence of the hardest moves, then you need to start linking chunks. Now, my route had 3 parts. So, once I could do each part individually, then my goal was to climb from that rest position that I told you about, that's before the crux chunk, climb from the rest position to the top. And once I did that one time, then you have confidence. It's like, okay, I climbed the crux to the anchors. Your confidence starts to swell. Okay, well, now all I have to do is do that bottom chunk and go to the top, and the route is done. Now, took me another day until that came to fruition, but that is how I began linking the route. So don't start right away from the ground. And there might be some routes where if it's a short route and the crux is at the bottom, then you might as well just start from the ground. But if your crux is mid route or higher on the route, then maybe try to climb from the rest right below the start of the crux to the top. And so connect the last couple of chunks of your project together. Now on a boulder, you really can't do that. I guess you can if there's a way to climb up something else to get to the crux handholds and then climb it to the top. Perhaps you could do that on a boulder, but boulders, you're typically starting from the ground each time. And then step 6 is as you begin to link chunks, eventually you get to the point that I was at where I could climb from the crux to the top. Then you need to go to the ground. And, I guess the decision here is how many goes to give it on any given day. In my case, I spent a couple of days, or actually 3 days, kind of working on the route and refining things. And, yesterday, ironically, was my day 2 of climbing. And, I kind of was feeling a little fatigued that probably it's not the day I'm going to send this route. So I kind of had the mindset of, I'm just going to go out there and do a couple of beta burns just to kind of get a little faster, maybe improve my body position and efficiency a little bit, and then take a rest day or 2 and come back and hopefully send the route. And what do you know? I ended up sending it on my second go yesterday, even though it was just meant to be a beta burn. It turned into the send go, which that's one of the beautiful things I love about climbing. And I'm sure perhaps you've experienced it if you've climbed enough, is where you are working around and you don't think you're quite there or quite ready. And you just kind of, relax because of that. You think maybe the send is still a day or 2 away or a session away. And so you're kind of relaxed going up there without any expectations, and you send. And so that surprise send phenomenon is one of the beautiful things about climbing. And it's in itself a lesson for us as climbers to let the outcome take care of itself. Very often, we are goal-oriented people. If you're doing this sport, you like to challenge yourself and do hard things. And because of that, you can really, feel a need to constantly be sending, constantly achieving. You put a lot of pressure on yourself, and that is not the best mindset for sending, especially routes that are at your limit, beyond your limit. But to trust the process and let the send happen organically, that is the best approach. And it's hard, to kind of let go of the outcome. We kind of want to rush things, so we can get onto the next project. And sometimes things happen quickly. Sometimes it's low-hanging fruit that fits you and things go fast. But then there are routes that take more effort. Like for me, 3 days and 9 goes on a 13A, that's a lot of time for that grade. I feel like I should have sent it way more quickly, but yet it's a hard route. It's a complicated route. And I was going to have to put my time in on it, and trust the process. And so I guess that's the final take-home message here, is that when you do begin those red point goes from the bottom, try to let go of the outcome, let the send happen when it is meant to happen, and you might surprise yourself. Now, if you come back to the route, once a week or a couple times a week, and you kind of get stuck in a rut, you're not making progress, the send isn't happening, then sometimes you need to take a break. And now that's a whole different subject, kind of getting into these long-term projects where maybe you have to do some route-specific training for a few weeks or a month or two, and then circle back to the route later where you're stronger. Or maybe just mentally, if you've put in, a bunch of days on a route, you just are kind of mentally burned out, not motivated, not inspired. And it's time for you to go do something fun. Go climb some routes below your limit just to, enjoy climbing again. Because, projects that become stale, where you plateau, you're not making progress, can be demoralizing. And so, that's something that, as a climber, you have to know when to take a break from things. And so I kind of think if you've put in 10 goes over 4 days, that's a good number. If you can send it 10 goes in 4 days, 12 goes in 4 days, something around that, that usually is a good amount of time to invest in a project that's right around your limit. Now, if you don't send it in that amount of time, then perhaps it's a route that doesn't cater to your style. Perhaps it's a route, next level route for you. And so if you're more than 10 or 12 goes over 4 days, then maybe it is time to do a little route specific training and take a break from the climb and circle back with fresh mind and a stronger body. And then you'll make progress and send it. But again, that's kind of a topic of its own. Okay, so it's time to get on to some questions. I hope you found that valuable. And let me just scroll up here. So psyched to see so many people tuned in. I know I missed Training Cafe the last couple of weeks because I was traveling 2 Mondays ago, and then last Monday we were out climbing, and today's a rest day. For me, I'm going to go out this afternoon and belay my son on his project. So maybe Project Sentage will happen 2 days in a row. We'll see here. Okay, Neil has a question about collagen. And yes, that is a topic I know a lot about because I studied the research for 3 or 4 years and developed the first climbing specific collagen product. He's wondering, is there evidence to suggest that collagen synthesis is more effective when you are at rest, sleeping, or when you're engaging in activities? And I guess on top of that, when would you want to consume the collagen? Tenocytes, which are the fibroblasts inside of our connective tissues, our ligaments and our tendons, the fibroblasts extrude collagen. They become active from mechanical loading. And so the recovery process, biologically, your muscles and tendons, there is protein synthesis ongoing pretty much around the clock. Your body's constantly, cells are breaking down and dying and new cells are being formed. But it's mechanical loading of tendons that turn the tenocytes on and kind of fire up that collagen synthesis. And then they stay turned on for a few hours and turn off again. And so when you're doing rehab, like if you're rehabbing an injury or if you're rehabbing an ACL replacement, post-surgery rehab, you want to actually you're better off doing 3 short rehab sessions per day to turn on the tenocytes to do their thing. And so you would do a rehab session in the morning, maybe in the early afternoon, and one in the evening. And each one would only be a short period of time. It could be as little as 5 minutes of loading on that specific, body part that you're targeting. Or it could be an hour, depending on, if you're doing a fingerboard workout or something. But it's better to do multiple shorter workouts when it comes to tendon loading and ligament loading, because they turn the tenocytes on, get them active, and then they turn off after a short period of time. They become refractory. Long workouts, actually, the tenocytes turn on, but then a real long workout, the tenocytes actually shut off and become refractory. It's kind of like when you're a parent lecturing your kids. They might listen to the lecturing you're giving them for a couple of minutes, and then if you're too long-winded, they kind of tune you out. And so think about that. That's how the tenocytes are that extrude collagen. They start to ignore what you're doing if it's a long session. So one mistake I think a lot of climbers make, especially on loading the highly stressed tendons of our upper body, is they do these really long sections, which are very stressful on our connective tissues, but they actually make the tenocytes more refractory to doing their thing. And so that could be one potential pathway to injury. That's why I recommend, especially elite climbers, pro climbers, do 2 shorter workouts a day, perhaps even 3 shorter workouts per day on a training day, rather than 1 4-hour workout where they try to do everything. I mean, from an energy system standpoint and from a connective tissue standpoint, it's better to break things up a little bit. And that's a complicated topic that has to be highly personalized. But final comment, Neil, because the loading of tendons and ligaments is how they are fed amino acids. It's fluid diffusion. When you're loading the tendons, synovial fluid moves in and out of them. So you want to have the collagen-specific amino acids circulating in your body, in the serum, when you're loading the connective tissues. So that's why the recommended usage of supercharged collagen is to consume it 1 hour before you train. And that gets the spike of collagen-specific amino acids in your system. And then you load your fingers or you do your climbing, and the amino acids are there to be drawn in to the loaded tendons. If you're rehabbing a knee injury, you would consume the collagen, and then an hour later you would do your knee rehab, your jump rope, your leg extension, whatever exercises you're doing. Because by loading the tendons in your knee, the rehab you're doing is then again drawing up the collagen-specific amino acids. So there's really good science. I know there's skepticism out there about this type of thing, but when you explore the science that's been done in the labs, the in vivo studies, the in vitro studies, the elite athlete case studies, there's ongoing clinical research that's being done, and certainly a lot of surgeons that work with professional athletes are now recommending this type of nutritional intervention along with the rehab, and all the anecdotal evidence. It works, as Drew Ruana testified in the text message he sent me yesterday. Okay, let's just zip through here a few more questions. I want to try to sign off here by about 45 minutes or so. Okay, let's see here. Timothy, is there an ideal arc training session, time in the wall sets, etc.? Currently doing 2 sets, 30 minutes. Okay, yeah, so arc training stands for aerobic recovery, circulatory training. It's a term that's been around for 25 years. I think it was Udo Neumann, the German climbing coach, who wrote a great classic training book, Performance Rock Climbing, back in the 90s with Dale Goddard here in the United States. Promoted the idea of arcing, which is very submaximal climbing, well below your limit. It's, if you're a 512 climber and you're going to do some of this type of arc training, you would get on routes in the gym It could be traversing along the base of a wall without a rope on, or I think better is doing roped routes. But the key is it's got to be very submaximal. You're not getting massively pumped. If you're a 512 climber, your training would be on 5'8", 5'9", 5'10" type routes. You're arcing. So you're climbing on good holds, you're getting circulation going, you're getting a light pump going, but you're not getting a max pump going. You're not falling off moves because they're too hard or too pumpy. So you got to get the intensity right. And it can be a little boring, especially if you're on a tread wall or if you're traversing. So it's more fun if you can get a partner and go to the gym and do laps on routes that are very submaximal for you. And 2 sets of 30 minutes is great. Think of this arc training as like if you've ever done any running for sport, what they call long, slow distance running, where you just go out and you run 10 or 15 kilometers or 5 or 10 miles, whatever, at a very comfortable pace that you can have a conversation with, the person you're running with. So that type of training intensity targets the aerobic energy system. It's good for circulation. It's good for recovery, but it's not creating nervous system fatigue. You're not getting acidity. You're not having any harmful effects. So that type of thing is really good for route climbers. It can benefit boulderers because a stronger aerobic system helps you recover more quickly between hard boulders, but it's more essential for route climbers to arc. So 2 sets of 30 minutes is great. Another approach would be to do, maybe 4 sets of 15 minutes. If you're doing the traversing thing and 30 minutes is just too long to handle, would be to, do 15 minutes, then rest 5 minutes, then do 15 and rest 5 and do 15. And, if you can accumulate 30 to 60 total minutes of climbing on the wall, again, non-pumpy climbing on the wall, then you've had a pretty good arc session. Now, this type of training, you think of it as base training. It's not going to take you to the next grade. You need to train maximum strength and power, and then you need to train power endurance at some point in your training cycle. So you can't arc all the time. It's something you would do a couple days a week as supplementary training to your other training. Okay, Carabiner says, hey, and so does Scott. Okay, live at a farm. Don't have access to climbing gym, climb every second weekend, endurance. Yeah, so, a lot of people are in that situation where you don't have regular access to a climbing gym or to crags. You need to kind of kludge together your own training facility. If you can build a little bouldering wall and have a hangboard and build a little bit of a campus board, certainly you can train the maximum strength and the power end of the spectrum. The arc training is going to be tough to do if you're at home and don't have access to a climbing gym. You can do repeaters at a low intensity, many sets of repeaters on a hangboard at less than body weight and kind of get the same effect as an arc training workout. But home training for most people is going to focus on training maximum strength on a hangboard or on a bouldering wall. And you can do core and you can do antagonist training. You can do a lot of good training at home if you're resourceful. As during the COVID lockdown, a lot of people by necessity had to start doing that. And so, I think on, having a good hangboard, assuming you're not a beginner, you could do 3 hangboard sessions a week, do maybe 2 that focus on maximum grip strength, and then another 1, perhaps 2 that are more low intensity, less than body weight repeater workouts. And you will get some gains in strength and strength endurance that carry over to when you are able to go to the crag. Okay, LP, planning an 8-week program according to your book. The beginners have. Okay, how much rest between training blocks? It depends, which is a common answer I have because training for climbing is so complex and we're all individuals, and there is a need for personalized training programs, and that's why working with a coach can be a great thing if you can do it one-on-one. Getting a program out of my book or downloading or buying a program off the internet may help guide you, but it's not going to likely give you the best program for you. And so you need to self-coach, educate. That's why you're watching Training Café, to hopefully get some ideas and information and some wisdom on how to refine your training. And so in terms of a rest or a deload week, a week off or a deload week every 8 weeks or every 10 weeks, I think is very, very prudent. If you are religiously training, following a schedule, executing 3 or 4 days a week for 8 to 10 weeks, that's a lot of training, and your body will start to fall behind, especially the connective tissues. We don't know it. We sense when our muscles are tired. We have soreness. We don't feel sharp. We feel, maybe lack inspiration. Those are all signs of, a tired body, a fatigued nervous system. But we have really no way to sense connective tissue fatigue or strain until you get injured. And so you need to be proactive, again, not overtraining, getting enough protein in your diet. Let's see, I just saw my video drop out there. I hope I'm back here streaming live. But in any case, at some point, you need to dial things back and let your system catch up. And so 1 week after 8 weeks is a great rule. For me, I don't do 8 or 10 week blocks anymore. I do shorter 3 to 4 week blocks that are quite intense. And I'm trying to outdoor climb now as much as I can. And so I will train hard for sometimes just 2 weeks. And then the third week is a deload week where I don't stop training, but I do half of what I normally do. So 2 hard weeks of training where I'm really working hard at my limit, doing, my max strength power stuff, my power endurance, kind of using a DUP scheme. And then by week 3, I feel my body falling behind, and I don't want to get injured. So you do a deload week. And I cut the volume in half. Do the same workouts, cut the volume in half. And that's where you have to be disciplined that on that deload week, you're not going to push it too hard. And that's why for some people, it might just be better to take the week off or take 4 days off. I think that's really smart training because you come off of that deload week. If you test your grip strength, oftentimes you'll be at a new level. Whereas if you just keep training without ever taking that rest week or deload week, you plateau and even start to decline and perhaps get injured at some point. So rest days, rest weeks, deload weeks, you need to have them somewhere in your program. Again, a personalized program working with a coach can help you dial it in. Okay. Oh boy, so many questions here, so little time. I will try to do one of these next Monday back in Pennsylvania when I get home, if possible. Thoughts on fascia and various massage tools. I think there's some benefit there. I use an arm aid, which is kind of a clamshell type thing with an orange ball that you can apply pressure and work like the forearm muscles. Find those trigger points where there's like muscle spasms that can set up when you're training hard or climbing hard. And doing things to attack the muscle trigger points. Yes. Now, when it gets to the connective tissues, some stretching, may be a good thing. I'm cautious about applying direct pressure to tendons and ligaments. A good PT who really knows what they're doing, might be able to do that in a beneficial way, but I would be cautious. Like if you have a sore tendon and ligament, I don't know that there's much to gain from direct pressure on it. Again, tendons and ligaments need loading to activate the tenocytes and to get that fluid diffusion that feeds them. And so the worst thing for tendons and ligaments is total rest. Now, if you have an acute injury, you sprain your ankle, yes, you need to have total rest for a couple of days, maybe use crutches. Or if you have a pulley tweak, you need to rest for a few days initially. But once the inflammation is resolving, you need to begin gradual introduction of loading, because it's the loading that gives the information to the tenocytes on how to align the collagen. Total rest, first of all, the tenocytes don't get so active. And when they are active, if they don't have a loading signal, they lay down the collagen haphazardly, and then you get a failed healing. And that's what leads you down the path of tendinosis. There's long-term injuries that last for months or years, most common in the elbows. It's failed healing. And so the goal is to avoid injury at all costs. But if you do get injured, then you need to have a very savvy rehab program that involves some loading, but not too much loading. And that's why just trying to climb through injuries is a failing strategy a lot of the time, because if you're just doing more of the same thing excessively on an injured connective tissue, then it's likely going to get worse. But the other end of the spectrum is doing nothing. Just like you get the finger tweak, the elbow tweak, and you stop climbing for 3 months, stop all loading for 3 months. That is arguably almost as bad as continuing to climb all, full force. The best outcome is a combination of the two. I've written some articles on those topics on the PhysiVantage website. If you click on the science link, or you can get some more background on what's going on in those situations. But in terms of direct pressure and to tendons, I'm not a big fan of that. I think to muscles and fascia, yes, I think that is a good thing. I think trigger point therapy and all the different tools that go along with trigger point therapy, as a rule of thumb, can be beneficial and helpful. Okay, Greg, welcome back. Wants to know about off the climbing wall exercises to improve climbing motion and technique. Well, the big one is flexibility. Both passive and active flexibility exercises. If you go back and watch the Adam Ondra movie Silence, you see him working with his physical therapist, actually doing his, he's actually practicing the body positions of his route while laying on the floor, contorting his body in the unique way that he needed to on the crux of silence. So that's taking it to an extreme. But being able to have a proper mobility through your shoulders and through your hips is important for both climbing performance and injury avoidance. And so, those are some basic things I think every serious climber should be doing every day. You need rest days from climbing and from rigorous training, but doing a little bit of flexibility work is something that every serious climber should be doing at the bare minimum, like 10 or 15 minutes at night before bed, when you're kind of winding down and relaxing, doing some hip mobility work. And I know, some of the pros I'm aware of do more like 30 to 45 minutes on a daily basis every day. I mean, it's not the funnest stuff to do, to work on your hip flexibility. It isn't as gratifying as doing a fingerboard workout, but you could argue just as important as doing a fingerboard workout. So if you're someone who never stretches, then there's a great room for improvement, and you're likely not climbing your best. It's something I could improve on. And there's genetic limits to your flexibility, obviously. And, age becomes a limit as well, as you get less mobile as you get older. So get into a habit of stretching young, and then stay with it throughout your years of climbing or even non-climbing. And it'll be a good thing for your back and your body overall. Question about when will PhysiVantage products be in the UK? We ship to Europe every week, but it's expensive. It's not ideal. Most of the European countries charge a VAT, a tax on nutritional products coming in. So it's not ideal. I tell the hundreds of climbers I hear from in EU countries to hang in there. COVID's making it more difficult to sort out what's necessary to import PhysiVantage products into the EU countries, but I'm talking to some distributors, and I have some friends over there advising me, and I hope it's something we can get set up in 2021. So hang in there. I'd love to provide the PhysiVantage to European climbers, because if you're training right and eating right, then the nutrition can be a difference maker. If you're trading wrong and eating wrong, then save your money. The nutritional products aren't going to fix a broken system, let's say. Okay. Possible, let's see here. Training each energy system throughout the week. Yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And that I mentioned earlier that I most of the year use a DUP, a daily undulating periodization scheme. Classic block periodization that's been around for 50 years, where you have a block training your aerobic base, and then you have a block of a few weeks where you train max strength and power, and then you have a shorter block of power endurance before you go into your performance period. That is like the 4-3-2-1 or 3-2-1 training cycles I've outlined in my Training for Climbing book for many years. And those types of block schemes, progressions, have their place, especially like during a long winter off season from climbing, especially for a beginner to intermediate climber who needs to work on all three energy systems in a structured way and be consistent about it. But for a more advanced climber, perhaps like you or like me, trying to just kind of stay where I'm at year over year as an older climber, I hope to eke out, gains, but, realistically, your body is retreating when you're in your 50s. And so it's kind of a battle just to hopefully stay healthy and strong. But in any case, the DUP scheme is exactly what you described. And that's where you train each energy system at least once in a week. And so for me, let's say if I'm climbing on the weekend, Monday is a rest day from loading my tendons and ligaments. I might do, some antagonist work or maybe go for a run. But Tuesday is a strength power day where I would do some max hangs on the hangboard. I would do some bouldering. I would do some campus training. If I have the time, I actually break it into 2 sessions. As I was describing earlier, 2 sessions about 6 hours apart is better than 1 long session. Then, so that's Tuesday. Then Wednesday, I do more power endurance and aerobic endurance. And so typically the first session on Wednesday would be more of a power endurance, really pumpy, hard workout. You get acidity, you get really pumped. Bouldering 4x4s. I do treadwell intervals, Frenchy pull-ups, which are a strength endurance exercise. And then my evening session on Wednesday is more that arc session, is more an aerobic threshold type workout where I'm climbing below the anaerobic threshold or right near the anaerobic threshold. So I'm consuming a lot of oxygen and getting a light pump, but not pumping out. So it's almost kind of starting the recovery process. And then Thursday and Friday are just kind of active recovery days, and then climbing on the weekend. So I've hit each energy system at least once during the week from one of those workouts. My weekend climbing, sorry about that. My weekend climbing tends to be routes. And so that is more aerobic and anaerobic lactic. And not so much alactic. And so I've, if you count the weekend climbing activities, I've hit at each energy system twice throughout a week. And so that's a pretty good, on-season way to go about things. You're not going to get huge gains out of that, but if you're climbing outside a couple days a week, the DUP scheme is a good way to keep all your energy systems up to snuff during the week. And if you ever start to notice your performance dropping off, your muscles aren't recovering, or, again, any achiness in your tendons or ligaments, then it's absolutely time for a deload week where you pull back or even take, 3 or 4 days in a row off completely from climbing and training. Let your body catch up, then you can go back into the DUP scheme. Okay, again, I'm getting really long-winded and over time, so I'm going to make this my last question here. Aiden has typed a long one in here. Let me just go through this. Okay, so he's going to have some time away from climbing, perhaps as much as 2 years, and then after that, hopefully come back and still be a 512 climber. And so, yeah, I mean, a hangboard is, I would say, an essential tool. If you can, even if you can't physically have a hangboard with you on your mission, you can hang on an edge above a doorway, or you can make yourself some type of an edge or a few edges. So ideally, if you can train some different grip positions. I mean, that half crimp is always the first thing you should train, but training some open drag type grips, pocket grips, pinch grips. I prefer training standing with your hands at your side. Pinching blocks that are fairly wide are better than narrow blocks. So a wide block. And again, you can probably kludge tools while you're on to your mission to train those positions. Of course, working your flexibility throughout, staying in aerobic shape, not, hopefully not gaining a ton of weight while you're away. I'm sure those things won't be a problem for a young, energetic person. But trying to do as much comprehensive training as you can, even though you can't physically go climbing, is going to be very helpful. And the beauty is, since you've already climbed up to the 512 level, that means you know how to climb. Kind of like riding a bike or skiing. If you've done it, well earlier in your life, you can take a few years off and not forget how to do it. Your brain has been wired to be a climber. And so the good news is, I would say if you stay in shape, even though you don't climb for 2 years, I would bet you get back to climbing after that 2-year break. And if you're in decent shape, you're probably back to 512 climbing in a matter of months. I think that's very, very doable. Now, if you go away for 2 years and do no climbing training and put on 20 pounds, then maybe it's a longer return to climbing. But I think, you'll be likely super motivated. And if you stay in shape, you'll return home and be doing great. Okay, and I really apologize. I see at least another 15 or 10 or 15 questions here that I just can't get to because I'm coming up on exactly an hour. Let's wrap up this Training Cafe with another sip of coffee together. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate all the positive feedback. And I'm trying to make these an every Monday occurrence. So if I didn't get to your question today, hopefully I'll be back next Monday and I will be able to get to your question. Get signed in early and enter your question early on, and there's a better chance I will get to it. Of course, visit my website, trainingforclimbing.com, for a wealth of articles and videos and podcasts. My Training for Climbing podcast on iTunes. Subscribe to it if you haven't already. And of course, PhysiVantage is my performance nutrition company. You can learn more about it at PhysiVantage.com. That does it for today's Training Cafe. Until next time, climb strong.